If Midnight has anything to prove, it's that WoW is here to stay. Things like player housing, class changes, the whole World Soul saga may only have one more expansion after this, but we even see they're planting lore seeds for years and years to come. That all takes manpower and investment, so today, that's what we'll be talking about. Today, we're going to investigate whether Blizzard are actually putting their money where their mouth is. And that's because words are cheap. All this talk of the future is well and good, but they need to follow up. To do that, they need a team, and thankfully, I know the perfect way to check. Deep diving into Midnight's credits and charting the changes of the World of Warcraft development team over the years. This one is going to be a roller coaster ride. Trust me, we definitely got more than we bargained for with this one. With so many people playing WoW, it can be hard to stand out, hard to get the perfect mog. It's a bit like that online. Everyone's online, but the question is, do you look pro or do you look forgettable? And today's sponsor, Squarespace, has been shipping serious upgrades to help you in that, and they're worth paying attention to. Here is Finish Layer. It's the kind of new headline feature. It gives you professional grade animation, scroll effects, and transforms. It's the sort of polish that used to require hiring a developer, and it turns a standard site into something that is immersive, and it's all built into their editor. And of course, that's all on top of their blueprint system that walks you through building your own custom template, asking you what pages you need, suggesting fonts that work together, and a color palette that ties it all together. So you get no blank canvas paralysis, you get guided decisions that are based on their 20 years of design experience. And while you probably know about all their e-commerce stuff, you can actually sell things in person with Squarespace, be it merch, services, whatever. It all works now with tap to pay on iPhone, so you can just accept contactless payments with just your iPhone. No card reader, no extra hardware. And that alone makes Squarespace a hell of a lot more than just a website builder. So you can build your site for free at squarespace.com/BellularGaming. And when you're ready to set it live, use code BellularGaming and that'll get you 10% off your first purchase of a site or domain. Take a look at this. It's our monster spreadsheet. It has the name and the role of everyone in Midnight's credits. And obviously, we have to talk about the important thing. And that's the return of Chris Metzen to top billing. Yes, the WoW news cycle somehow is able to say every 6 months that in some new way, Chris Metzen has returned. He's returned even more than you thought. At least here we see he's now the first person in the credits. So I guess he's the single most influential person on the project. So there you go. Tough luck, Holly Longdale. You're no longer top billing. That's a little bit of a joke, but I do actually bring this up with a bit of a point. You see, in The War Within, Chris Metzen was a measly number 4. Now he's at the top. That is, I think, a bit of an intentional decision. You'll learn more about why and how the lore feels actually later on in this video, because it is somehow relevant. Of course, he has still got his title of Executive Creator Director, meaning the World of Warcraft is, once again, very much his world. But he sure ain't hopping into WoW Edit to build the whole damn thing himself. So let's talk about the team. This is where it gets fascinating. Midnight has, and I'm not exaggerating, a whopping 811 people listed on the credits who have direct day-to-day involvement. So to be clear, that's not the number of entries in the credits, it is the credits then filtered into the people who are actively working on World of Warcraft, or who, at least during this expansion's development cycle, worked on this expansion. That is a fairly large team size. And for comparison, that's the same amount that The Witcher and Cyberpunk developers have got across all of their upcoming titles. So close to, say, $100 million a year in developer salary. A little bit mind-blowing, and it does bode well for the future. But get this, it is not the full story, because Midnight's credits have actually shrank. Yes, this was a shock. The War Within's credits show 853 people. Sadly then, that means that the game has had, overall, about 5% fewer people working on it. Now obviously 5% doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a whole 42 people. Imagine what you could do with 42 full-time employees, and now imagine them gone. That's gotta sting. And if this video was to have a chart of it's so over and we're so back, in saying that, I suppose we're now at the it's so over part of the video. But it is, of course, a hell of a lot more complicated than just that. Because there's something far more important than the raw number here, and that is the actual roles. While going through the credits, we tagged each role with a specific category, so we can see what team changes are likely to matter. And if I'm honest, I was definitely not expecting the results that we got, because only 3 categories grew between expansions. The design category is everyone actually making either content or visible changes in the game, and it grew by 5 members, 177 to 182. Not a massive change, but still, despite a slightly smaller team, Midnight has got more people actually putting things in the game. The other growing team then is testing. That's up by a grand total of 6, and it means that there's now 132 people credited on this WoW expansion in a test role. Now, I know that doesn't really sound right. We haven't had a patch release without issues, pretty much for this entire expansion, yet testing staff actually makes up over 16% of their total headcount. So it turns out that both things can be true. Whatever WoW's core quality assurance issues are, they're probably not money problems. Then the last growing team is the sound team, with 15 people now credited on audio and music, up from 13. No big change there, perhaps a few hires and perhaps some churn. But I do have to get a little bit more serious here, because the biggest percentage drop was in support. And in this case, that doesn't mean game masters, it means product side roles. This is things like marketing, WoW-specific finance, stuff like that. It's down by 13%, but only losing around 10 staff comparing credit list to credit list. So honestly, not much to say with this one, but the next one definitely does have a lot to say. You see, the category hit hardest in raw numbers, and this shocked me, was actually engineering. They're down by 17 whole engineers this expansion. And looking at it closely, there's no real pattern. Some engineers left, they got new engineers. And if you wanted to start doom posting, I suppose this would be the time. I mean, a shrinking engineering staff can't be good. They're the most expensive staff, and they're often the ones who keep the whole game from falling apart. Every major advancement in WoW's recent quality of life, from housing to transmog, has been engineering-led. Except, there is one small little thing. Every number in this section has a humongous asterisk. And now it's time that I explain that to you. You see, it turns out Blizzard does something unusual with their credits. If someone leaves mid-development, they still get credited. But they get credited with a different title. And that is the thing that is, well, different. Obviously, if you leave a project mid-development, you should still be credited on that project. I'll give you an example, and one you may recognize. Steve Denuser. In Dragonflight, he was lead narrative designer. In the credits, he is right there with the other leads. But then he left Blizzard in November 2023, midway through the War Within. Of course, it was literally his job to build it, and as we've told you in other videos, the likes of the Harrenir do appear to be his baby. Blizzard respect that, so his name is, as it should be, in the credits of this expansion. But he wasn't lead narrative designer at the time, so instead he has been credited as, quote, additional leadership. And because we know this, we can use it as code for left Blizzard. Now, he's been gone for over a full expansion, and he is not in the Midnight credits. And that gives us something to properly compare the War Within to Midnight. You may be wondering why. Here's why. It's because Blizzard seems to do the same with other roles. As an example, additional engineering. And here's what that actually means. The War Within has 20 engineers credited who left before launch. So in reality, that means that Midnight's engineering team is actually bigger than War Within's team whenever War Within shipped. In fact, the War Within absolutely had more total contributors than Midnight, but if we account for all the staff who left, Midnight ends up looking bigger. And here's the actual count. There were 100 people tagged as additional before, and now Midnight has only got 13. That basically means it seems a lot fewer people left in the middle of development, and if you ask me, that's a promising enough looking sign. Obviously, it's not completely fair to take those people out because they did do work in the game. What we can instead do, though, is split them up. So let's call our big number total contributors, that number being everyone who is credited. By that metric, Midnight does appear to be a bit smaller. But if we only look at still there at launch, it actually tells a bit of a different story. At launch, War Within had 753 people. Midnight had 798. So instead of being 5% smaller, like the raw figure tells us, it's actually 5% bigger. So there you go. Midnight's actual patch development team appears to be more stable, maybe happier to continue with development. And that means that if we check back on our chart, we are now at the we're so back part, which is exciting. But we're not going to be there forever, because this roller coaster has still got a few more loops. Not every bit of work in the game is done by people in the credit list. In fact, certain people are responsible for much more work than a single person can do. You see, in The War Within, there were 10 people responsible for outsourcing. Yes, by the way, Blizzard uses external studios for World of Warcraft, like everyone else in the games industry. It is a completely normal thing, but they label it very specifically in their credits. Supervisors for character art, environment art, and UI art, and in Midnight we see that team has grown by 16. So 6 more supervisors means a lot more external work being done. You might be a bit spooked hearing that number, but I can at least say that so far nothing in Midnight has seemed out of place, so it's worth keeping that in mind. The team itself isn't just bigger, it perhaps has more access to external resources as well, or perhaps, if it's the same external resources, has more people managing that, which should help keep the quality bar up. But I said this was a roller coaster, and as good as this all sounds, there is a fairly worrying figure in the data. Okay, I know there's a stack of ideas in this video, so here's where we're at. We've learned that Midnight's total contributors is smaller. We know that Midnight's staff at launch figure is larger, and they might outsource more. All in all, it seems like we're in a really good spot. But obviously, people aren't just numbers. You need experienced, skilled people to make a good game. So, what we did is we compared names. Now here's how we read it. If someone's name is new to Midnight, then they're marked as green. If someone is new in the War Within's credits, but not in Midnight, we've marked them as red. We also have total counts, and those are honestly a little bit scary looking. You see, in Midnight, there's 149 new staff. That means that 18% of the people working on the game haven't worked on WoW before. And perhaps worse than that, there are almost 200 names in the War Within who are not there in Midnight. I'll caveat that this wouldn't take into account, say, a name change from a marriage or something like that, but the number is 191. It seems to be 191 trained, experienced staff who worked on one expansion now being lost. And I'm going to be honest with you, replacing 20% of your staff every 18 to 24 months seems like a complete nightmare. I can see it working perhaps in other industries, but in a world where specific knowledge for a game, specific taste and craft for a game and its audience, those are so essential, well, yeah, that does seem like a hell of a challenge. It doesn't seem healthy for the game. So if we take a look at the chart again, yeah, we're at the it's so over part. Like, at the end of the day, that's just a shitload of lost knowledge. But it's not the complete story, because that stuff is true, but it actually turns out this is less change than usual. Dragonflight actually had, get this, 453 new staff members who weren't in Shadowlands, and 186 people from Shadowlands who did not make it to Dragonflight. That whole era, to put it mildly, was turbulent. So, we now see the team is getting more stable. 20% is still plenty of change, but actually, let me explain why I'm not overly worried just yet. Here, we color-coded the people who are new to Midnight and the people who left after the War Within. And if we scroll down, something's really obvious. Of everyone tagged as a lead, there are only 10 lead roles from the War Within's launch who left. In Midnight, only 6 leads are new. And the vast majority of leadership are still there. That's people at the director level, like say Ian Hazacostas, and also at the team level, meaning lead artists, lead designers, lead engineers. So the people we need the most, the people who have the knowledge that needs to be passed on, do appear to be staying. And that should hopefully mean those are the people who learned from their mistakes during the War Within and should be able to make better calls for Midnight. You know, in theory. So, leadership are pretty much intact, but what about the rank and file? Well, going further down the designers, there are a handful of levers here and there, but there's nothing shocking, just a few people churning out from each team. And for a game studio, that's a fairly normal thing. I mean, between the likes of Riot, poaching, and general hopping between studios, it's not an overly worrying pattern. And that means that the people who are making and designing content have had time to reflect, learn, and to make better stuff. And I'd say that from our time on beta so far, they've generally done quite a good job. From classes to quests to delves and everything else, you can tell that they've improved. In fact, it's the same story the whole way down. No team has been gutted, no key pillars of the game are gone, and where people have been left, they have largely been replaced. So, there you have it. The team who built Midnight, and will build its patches, is larger than before. It appears to be more stable than before as well. Now, it is true that lots of people have left, but also lots of people have joined. But even with that, the vast majority of the team is intact and growing, and it appears their churn rate is down from the dark times of Shadowlands and of Dragonflight. Now, maybe some of that is because the games industry is not completely flush of cash, and you don't have literally everyone having fun with 0% interest rates, forming new teams, doing all that stuff, and trying to poach the best and brightest from all the incumbent companies. So, they do have that in their favor, but still, things are looking fairly good. Blizzard are putting a lot of money into WoW's future, and I think this credits list is actually proof of that.